Hello, everyone. I guess we have 20 students or 20 people logged in. So, Jess, how do you pronounce your last name?
Payon.
Hang on. Jess is actually, as you can see, is good friends with Nick Jelpi, and I thank Nick for the sort of the connection and the introduction
Oh,
with Jess. Unfortunately, we didn't go to New York to see this site. Because we always travel with students. We did a really cool travel, a cool trip in the fall last year with Nick, his studio, and my studio. And Bond Street is a street that I really love. Um, it's just beautiful. So I'm super happy that we have this site. And fortunate that we could get a connection with you who designed one building on that specific street. So I guess students will find it useful to hear from you, like they're going through the challenges of the code and a lot of the elements that we all go through as architects. So Jess went to school at UC Berkeley, California, and after that he moved to New York City. He's a licensed architect in the state of New York. And you used to work for DDG for how many years, Jess?
I was there for about 10 years.
10 years. We checked on the DDG website when the students were doing the research
Yeah,
on the street, on all the buildings on that area. Um, and now you work on your own, right? You're doing.
I do. I have a day job. I work for another developer, a Chinese developer, China, called Strategic Capital. And
Uh-huh.
I'm the design director there and just basically help coordinate between ownership and the consultants on that. I don't really do any design work, but I'm their tastemaker in the office and tell them whether the architects are spending their money in a good way, essentially.
That's cool. That's cool. Okay, let's just start with
well,
our first.
Henry,
Yeah.
I'll just add that I think the blogs would have you believe that 40 Bond Street is the crown jewel of Bond Street, but it's not. 41 Bond is the best building on the street.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I
Stiff
agree.
competition on that street for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now students are doing 57th Bond Street.
Yeah.
That'll be the next one.
Exactly. Cool. Okay. Let me.
So should I take the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just gave you access to the screen.
Hey, Henry.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Okay. All right. As Henry and Nick introduced me, my name is Jes Paone. I'm an architect from New York City, and I'm going to talk about a project I worked on called Facades. Did this in between 2008 and 2011, 2010. So in 2008, DDG is formed by two developers, a lawyer, and an architect. The mission was to make money with design build led real estate development, in short. All kind of developer work in a it's a financial kind of quest essentially for developers. And for these guys, they came up with the idea that we should try to build the best architecture, and that would create the most value for the project. So at that time, I was working for the architect named Peter Guthrie, and I came along with him, and he partnered up with the other guys and formed DDG, and so I was the first hire, and kind of worked on co-design. I co-designed all the projects that we did with Peter, and kind of ran the studio for him essentially. So what DDG that was kind of different from most developers is what they called it integrated. They were integrated developers. They had to practice the integrated model, which was, you know, in the act of developing a building, you hire a litany of consultants, but the main ones are the architect and the construction manager. And so the premise was that, you know, to form a company that had the architecture and the construction management in-house and kind of did work on behalf of the developer only. And so basically to produce buildings that that were of the highest quality we could do, and really kind of try to push some design envelopes. In the traditional model, it's a developer hiring outside consultants, and really the relationship is often one that, you know, you're really fighting for money amongst the different characters that are involved in the project, and the developer is really kind of playing puppet master. And it's the model that exists, and kind of the integrated model is a little bit more challenging for the developer, which I think, you know, it's easier to kind of work the traditional model as a developer, and the developer ends up kind of being the person that has the money and therefore makes the decision. So I think that would be why you see the traditional model mostly, but the integrated model really allowed for some special things. Quickly getting into, you know, bluestone as a material. In the city of New York, you know, when you're building a project, for me, you know, I want to relate to the built environment that exists, and kind of I subscribe to regionalist ideas, and really kind of you can learn a lot about what's possible and what materials to use just by looking around, of course, right? See what people do. So there's this material bluestone, which you see on the sidewalk, and it's really a very humble stone. It's not celebrated ever. It's used as paving mostly, and, you know, many sidewalks, and it really has this capability to be cut into very large sizes, which makes it useful, and it's local. So, you know, we kind of were intrigued by the material, Peter and I, and we went up to some, you know, about 150 miles away from the city is where all this stuff comes from. So we want to really just like looking at just kind of the beauty of the material, and in its packaged form was very intriguing to us, and how, you know, how long to be material. I mean, that's one piece of stone. That's a lot of, and so, but we really, the way it's presented in a palette is like they're kind of small building diagrams to us, and really kind of intriguing. So we decided on to kind of work with bluestone. So, you know, as I said, it's found in this section of New York, which is the Delaware River water gap, kind of separating New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And you see its relationship to the city. It's basically a sedimentary rock. It's a sandstone formed in the Devonian age, which is approximately 350 million years ago. So I'm not a geologist, but like the idea that we're kind of pulling stuff from the earth that is that old, and is in New York, and, you know, kind of fit into our regionalist ideas, and, you know, it's beautiful. And so we kind of were really intrigued by it, and just the whole, you know, visiting the quarries, visiting the site tells you, like, just what for us was like, you kind of fall in love with the material, and the way that it's so architectural, and it's even the mining of it. And there's, you know, several different finishes and many colors you can pull out. And so we really liked it as a material. You can see in this, there's very fine grains in here, or lines really, those are the layers of sediment. And as a material, it's very soft and breaks in a way that's not great. So when you see it on the sidewalks, it's used in a way where the bed is facing up. The beds are the layers of the striations. Our premise, or kind of how we decided to use it to deal with that issue, was to turn it on its side and really expose these lines on the face of the building. And it's much more dense and more stable as a material that way. So right around the time we started Bond Street, we were finishing a project in Tribeca on Warren Street. This is 24 Warren Street. And so we were doing this research for this building and building this building. And, you know, this is prior to DDG, and Peter and I were a design build firm. We had our own construction crew and our own masonry crew, and we were building this project for the lawyer who's partner at DDG. And really, because of our model, because of the design build model, and because we had our own labor force and skilled masonry team, we were able to, in short, screw around with the stone and see what was possible and spend time making mock-ups and really kind of sketching with it, for lack of a better word. And you know, so we're building this and coming into 41 Bond. So here's 41 Bond. I mean, we had decided on this bluestone material as, you know, as something that was possible, and we had experienced it on this other project that we're kind of dovetailing into this. I mean, we were wary of doing, you know, one project after another with the same material, but also it proved to be something like, you know, to choose a different material on your next project every time is throwing away a lot of the knowledge that you learned about the material. And there's so much that goes into, for us, like, it's all about like how you put two pieces of things together. I mean, in a nutshell. And so to kind of have to learn that every time is one way to do it, but another way is to get better at material every time. And so we kind of chose that. You could see the organization of the building is very traditional. There's a base, a middle, a top. And part of that comes from, you know, landmarks, but it also is, you know, is to us, it's a more rich building if it kind of relates to the environment and doesn't kind of fight it. It's like all the good buildings in the past would have a water table and they would have an articulated base and so forth. So, you know, within that world, we try to do different things and have moments of weirdness. But, stepping back to Bond Street, you could see it's, you know where it is. It's in southern Manhattan. It's in the NoHo Historic District, north of Houston is what NoHo stands for, as you probably know. It was designated a landmark district in 2008, right around the time when we got the project. 2008 also was the market crash, right? So we came into this and were able to buy this from a developer that had worked on the project for several years and had gone through landmarks with his own design. And so because of the market crash, we were able to, we didn't have a legacy problem because we were formed during the market crash. So we didn't have any projects that were distressed, and we were able to take advantage of that and really buy this property from a developer at a very reduced price. Here's Bond Street. This is the building. This is kind of directly across the street, more or less. You see a building by Deborah Burke and kind of integrated with the old fabric of the street. It's really, you know, a treat to work on the street and the kind of the richness of the detailing and the buildings of different periods and this kind of neoclassical stuff to you know, the really great modern stuff that's being done there is it makes it a, you know, just a great place to do a building. This building 50 bond was really interesting to me, and in specific how, you know, they treat the windows, and it really informed us, you know, the kind of way that you could use reveals and kind of reductive clean detailing in masonry, and come up with something that, you know, if you were to kind of remove the top and just look at the center of that building, isolated, it's quite modern in its appearance. So this was the design from Stephen Harris for the previous developer. When we bought this project, this had already been approved by Landmarks and already had a full drawing set for, you know, structural and MEP, and really was ready to build. Us being architects, we wanted to redesign this, but, you know, financial pressures were such that it was an opportunity also to start this project based on the structure that was given to us. You know, so you have like a 6-month superstructure window where you're building that, and in that period, we told ourselves we're going to redesign this and get it approved, and by the time it's ready to go, we're going to have a new facade and kind of move forward with our design. But, you know, what you get in New York City from developers is typically trying, you know, from a formal perspective or a massing is really, you're just maximizing what you're allowed to build. So, you know, if you look at this, zoom back far enough, this probably isn't much different of a partie than 41 bond. I know it's not. So it's really, you know, you can choose to reduce the amount of square feet and kind of shape the building if you wanted to, but developers really don't do that. You know, basically you're maximizing the square footage, and each square foot is worth a dollar amount on your pro forma, and that's kind of informing it. So in a way it's freeing because you don't, you know, you're working within some confines, and when you have an open-ended, you know, if you're building out in the middle of nowhere and you have an open-ended site, the geometry, like how do you determine geometries and stuff like that, you know, it becomes very willful. Whereas this, given the parameters of design in the city of New York and this kind of mandate of just maximizing the square footage, following the zoning maximum, really frees you up for making decisions. So we were able to start the structure based on this design, but then move into our design process. You know, one of the things we always did is Photoshop. Just take some pictures and start this idea making, you know, like you can make a sketch like this in 15, 20 minutes and really just start looking at things and talking, you know, to yourself and your colleagues about in the design process about, like, you know, is this color right? Is this material right? You know, conceptually, does it tell us anything? And, you know, looking again at the way they stack a palette of bluestone and kind of just how beautiful is, you know, the overlays of the stone without even trying, you know. And so, like, is it crazy? We did a building after this that's kind of on Warren Street, also 12 Warren, that is more of a trying to kind of build this crazy bluestone quarry wall. But this one really, this kind of more buttoned up aesthetic and this more precision idea is really kind of what we ended up kind of latching into. Having our own masons, again, the advantage of being able to build mock-ups was really priceless, you know, to kind of generate all these nooks and crannies and understand how to do the reveals and how far the bluestone could project for the planners, and just, you know, trying out different trim details and all this stuff just wouldn't really be possible from an economics perspective to do with you know, a combative subcontractor who's in it for the money. And you know, that's the advantage of the integrated model for us is being able to work together towards the same goal of, you know, the best building, and everyone's going to make the most money if it's the best building. Here's some more of our design, you know, kind of coming to just covering the building, the massing in bluestone, looking at it from a street perspective. Of course, in New York, what you see mostly is when you're walking down the street is kind of this first floor, and looking at that, you know, in the SketchUp model, and this idea that, you know, we want to allow for a residential living to occur on this first floor, but yet people are walking by, and like, how do you cloak that, and how do you make that work? We also really interested in the idea of post-industrialized kind of landscapes, and how quickly nature starts to take over. The High Line was being built at this time, and it's very influential in our thinking, you know, this kind of like old infrastructure that really was just kind of left there, and the really kind of beauty of what happens when you just let nature kind of take over. So in our kind of integrated landscape ideas, we try to replicate this, you know, whatever, post-industrial landscape, what we call it. Here's some Photoshop study we would do. Again, it was kind of hard sell to landmarks that that bluestone would be an appropriate material for an entire facade, because it's known pretty much, just like I said, as a utility stone and as a paver. So we spent a fair amount of time in this way, looking at colors and kind of windows and recesses. Here's our building facades as they kind of ended up. You could see again with the organization on the street, with the base in the middle of the top. We have secondary materials that is a concrete board, and these layers that are set back from the main facade. You see the kind of frames we built, integrated planters, this marquee that got developed into a crazier thing. And then on the rear of the building, we had this big opportunity to get these really large windows going, and it faces a very nice yard, and looks onto these very old building backs off of Worcester Street that you can get some glimpses of in the interior shots. Here's a rendering of the street facade again, part of our design development, and just coming to really to be what we ended up with. We had to go through landmarks and kind of get that all on the table, and then we had to start building our
and Jesse,
yeah.
Jesse, landmarks in New York City is the equivalent of like Historic Preservation Board, I guess, right?
That's right. Yes. So there's the Landmarks Preservation Committee, and if you're working in a landmark district, which this is, I think your site is on the corner of Bowery. Is that right? Yeah. Which it looks like it's just outside of the landmark. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, you have to get aesthetic approval from them essentially. So they have to weigh in. You present the project in front of a board of, you know, they're kind of architects, typically city planners, politicians types that sit on this board. I think there's 12 of them, and discuss the merits of your project. And always, you know, they come back with comments and make you change things. And ultimately, I think that it comes out to be a more interesting building when you have these kind of exterior forces kind of pushing on your design.
Bowery does not have the same quality of architecture as Bond.
That's right. So it's it's cool. You know, you go into this arena and present in this building where, you know, whatever years and years of architects have gone through this and done it. we were able to get through on a few projects and kind of that are in landmark districts, but don't look like neoclassical buildings, and, you know, but there's, like this building, a lot of classical elements, but they're kind of forward thinking, you know. So this is how we got, you know, the stone delivered to the site, basically. Because we have our own crew, we were fabricating all the pieces. So it's the right height, 2 inches, and the right depth, 2 3/8. And then basically it was cut and the detailing was ground out at the corners, and it was just done with a lot of labor. Basically, our masonry group, they had the stone saw going for, I don't know, at least a year continuously. It was a horrible sound. But you know, it was the way that we were able to do this building in a cost-effective way. You know, I don't have all my drawings with me because I'm not here in Washington, but I was able to find some just to give you a sense of the depth of the window and how the planter worked. This is an early sketch, and the window set back from the street, little projection. Ultimately, it's only projecting you know, 4 inches from the street facade, but kind of couple that with a double reveal, and it starts to appear much more dramatic. And also, you know, looking at this is it being built. This is the window frame here, the kind of double reveal we did, how this is the planter. You know, basically from a construction perspective, it's no different than a brick cavity wall. That's how we approached it, where, you know, this dimension is similar to a brick dimension. However, they're much longer, typically, but, you know, it's essentially a kind of topographic exercise where it's a bunch of horizontal lines, and if you want to make an indentation, pull it back. To simplify it, I mean, there's structural issues, there's you know, formal issues that have to be addressed relative to the slab and how this is supported and stuff, but you know, we worked all that out, and we're able to pull this off. There's things that I look at now, you know, when I see this sketch, I mean, this photo, and wish that we had probably done a little more careful cutting and stuff like that, to where, you know, if you look at this area, it might be prone to problems if water gets in there and freezes because of all the articulation and that. I don't think water's going to get in there. It's really vertical, but, you know, things like that. But we were optimistic, and we were young, and kind of working on this project in a way that was it was rewarding, but it was a little like I would say uninformed about some of the history of masonry and stuff like that and what we were doing. But I think it also allowed us to kind of do what we thought was right, and kind of make this building in a way without anybody telling us how to do it or that we couldn't do it. Because really that's what you get in this industry. You hire all these consultants, and they just don't want to take any responsibility for anything. And it's all about, you know, avoiding lawsuits and being conservative. And so the result is you can see here of that detail. If you look back, how this is projecting out, this detail, and then you can see that happening here. There's the planter, integrated planter. This allows people to open their window and reach out and tend to the plants. Most people have gardeners do it, but you know, the idea that this nature would grow on the facade was always something very important to us. here you can see some of the construction of the facade. You know, we had these insane stringing exercises where, you know, the strings were sacred. You know, they kept getting broken, and using wire and just really trying to make sure that the building was so precisely lined up and crisp. And these guys are grinding the edges of the stone to kind of produce this detail here. So, you know, they're stacking all that up. The stone we got, you can see basically we took a tile saw and out of 45 and cut the angle, and then they would finish off a little doodad at the end with the grinder. Here,
was that all eye calculated, like, or do you have any kind of forms or templates to follow?
We had like jigs on the saw that stopped it when they were cutting, so they could cut it and not overcut it, you know. But that was the this kind of final touch up was just about the workmen, you know, and they're probably not all perfect, but you know, they would saw cut to there, and then the guy would come in and do a little curlicue at the end. So, but it reads pretty consistent on the facade. You can kind of see it up there, and you know, we also were interested in like the loft. You look at those old buildings on Bond Street, and like no one builds like that anymore. Like, no one has that capability or that skill. And these guys didn't necessarily build that way, but you know, we experimented, and we're fortunate to have our own, you know, mason team. And they were okay trying things. So we, you know, look at this kind of little details in stone to round them off, where they might get chipped off, but then come back to a square. Here you can see they're installing a piece of this kind of water table at the bottom, and you know, we wanted to express the initial design didn't have this in here, but Landmarks wanted a base, and so we said, okay, you know, we'll kind of provide these cuts, you know, like this cut, for example, is in plan is just a semicircle cut out of the stone, and then you stack it up. Like the kind of topography nature of all these lines allows for this three-dimensionality to occur by just pushing and pulling with this material. These guys installing this water table at the base, I mean, this comes from visiting the quarry and seeing, you know, how they actually remove the stone is they drill a bunch of holes, and then they use water. They fill them with water and then drop in a little charge, and just a little pressure would crack the stone, and so you'd end up with these tool marks. So, you know, we were able to kind of use this other texture as the base. Here's this crazy marquee that we got built. This was built by this Corvette specialist up in the Catskills. This guy we found that, you know, basically we built this out of sheet metal, half-inch sheet metal plate, really, and then brought it up to this Corvette guy, and he finished it as though it were a Corvette. So it's got this really high polished automotive paint finish on it, and you know, to have this weird geometry was something that you know, we wanted to kind of form this cup that would hold these this vegetation and be something weird, you know. I mean, it's like you end up building these very serene kind of middles, but like moments of craziness and kind of modernity or contemporaneous really appeal to us. You know, here's the secondary material on the back. It's a rain screen made of concrete board. And, you know, we thought it paired well with the bluestone, and it's much faster to erect and install. And ultimately, that's kind of what drove the choice. It has a green roof.
Is that Equitone or similar?
It is Eternit.
Okay, yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, same kind of stuff. It's like a compressed
fiber cement, like fiber cement.
Yeah, wood fibers and cement. Yes, that's the right. You can kind of see it's an open joint rain screen. I'll go back to that one. And so there's, you know, an air barrier, waterproof membrane behind it, and then purlins in front of it that are all attached and kind of waterproofed on the attachment. So it's really kind of a rain screen and a rain barrier that lets air in, but the pressurization of the atmosphere levels kind of inside of the layer between the outside and the inside keep water out. And it's all, we got a custom made aluminum channel we had fabricated that allowed for, you know, this recess in the center and then have the two connections. We also used a green roof assembly on this, you know, to kind of go with our kind of biophilia look, post-industrial landscape. Here's the facade. You know, it changes throughout the year depending on the seasons with the Boston ivy. You can get a better view of that secondary material and penthouse. All of the interiors had a fireplace that they each had individual chimneys running up the spine. You see some of the really pairing of nature with this humble, rough material. Really looked amazing. It worked well for us. See some detail and the building. This is actually taken from 40 Bond Street. You can see that in here. And actually, that tower we were talking about on the Upper East Side, our, you know, the main financial partner's daughter lives in 40 Bond, and he would come and he saw our building being built over time and really liked it, and was able to fund our Upper East Side tower based on his understanding of what we can do here. Here's inside the lobby. You know, we bring the material, try to always bring the material from the outside in. And, you know, this is all informed. This is a mirror here looking. So this bench is kind of cantilevered stone. It's all informed by the palletized bluestone when we visited the yards, and just kind of that look being replicated and really exploring the patterns you can get with it. It was just a lot of fun to do, you know, and really kind of play with the material. So quickly through the interiors, you know, the project is 9 apartments, 9 floors. They're basically floor through apartments. They're like about 2,600 square foot, 3 bedrooms. What's unique about our plan was that we flipped the arrangement to where most of the time in New York, the living area is on the street. This is Bond Street up here. And the bedrooms are in the back. We flipped that relationship because we have this huge yard in the back that allowed for these expansive windows, and you'll see this great room here. This is the townhouse on the ground floor, which has an extra 4 feet of ceiling or so. So it's higher than the typical one, but big airy space. Again, we brought in kind of some traditional touches. We have like a reductive wainscoting happening that runs throughout the project, and some old world ideas about detailing, but it's just kind of trying to make something that is not overtly modern or traditional, but it pairs the two. See, looking into that backyard and kind of this old fabric of the city back there, bringing some of the bluestone in. It gets a little heavy as a material, so we kind of always were conscious about trying to bring it in to blur that relationship. There's some more interiors. The penthouse has a solarium on top. Stairs go up to great views of the city, and you see this kind of secondary material. We used like a mirror up there on the underside of the soffits, just to try to reflect down, to use a shiny material juxtaposed to the roughness of the building. And that's it. I don't really have, unfortunately, like my working drawings or any of that. I mean, but how it was done because of our ability to work, directly with our own team of contractors, was a lot of sketching, a lot of SKs. The set was very kind of thin for all the amount of detailing we did. Yeah, so if there's any questions or if you'd like to go back to any images or anything like that.
Well, great talk. It's great to hear. I mean, the process, not only the building, but how the office like operated, and it's kind of unique. I mean, you don't expect that to happen in New York City on a building like this. That, I mean, you were kind of like not kind of old school, but kind of like experimenting in a way on an expensive property.
Yeah.
Where like people would be, I mean, developers or investors would be more, corporate about that. And I think that's great. I mean, it feels more like architecture from other countries where the laws are more kind of flexible, let's say, and architects are more hands-on the design. So I really appreciate that. I had no idea that it was so sort of directed, that you had your own team of masons, which is great. I mean, I really appreciate, and that's the profile of architect that I like. I mean, people that go to the site and people that are involved in the construction process, because to me, it's a great joy to see things happening and to be kind of like be able to touch the materials and be there.
Yeah, I mean, it tells us, I mean, the design, like if we had never gone to the quarry or experimented and done mock-ups, I mean, the design would never be what it is. It just is, to really know the material is key to our way of doing it. It's not the only way, but it's a satisfying way to us. It's difficult to do it, one of the problems of the company became when we were successful. This building was super successful and sold out all 9 apartments in like a month. So we got more work and we grew, and it was very difficult to kind of maintain this level of detailing. And we tried to do it. We didn't stop, but then we got stretched so thin that it became challenging. We hired, a lot of people, and we got much bigger. But at the end of the day, this kind of architecture where you're kind of doing what we did as far as being so involved with the construction and doing it in an old world way is appropriate on much smaller scales, or kind of one building at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the exposure is the best. You have a good building on the street, and if people see you working, also it's that's the formula of success. Like, perfect. There is a question from one of the students.
Sure.
Your plans are pretty rectangular. Was that the initial shape of the lot, or did you shape it differently to your advantage to make it more pleasant and consistent? I guess, I mean, the question comes because the lot that the students are working on that have no setbacks,
Yeah.
except for like on the upper floors, and you have like a backyard.
Um, for sure the street is going to be square, and the two sides of the building are square. I mean, we could have chosen to, let me see where that plan is. There is a one non-rectilinear shape on the back here. That relates to the lot. It's a setback to the lot 30 feet from the edge of our property. But, it's just it's also a commodity, when you're doing development architecture, and people tend to favor rectangular rooms, So like looking at this big, long expanse of a room, this is a 50-foot by 20-foot room. It didn't really make sense to us to have any shape that really wasn't a square, I guess.
I mean, even Henry, even Zaha Hadid's tower here in Miami, they're rectangular rooms.
Yeah.
And it's Zaha,
But is that a required setback that you have in the back, like a back?
So I mean, there's the zoning envelopes often, yes, there's a 30-foot setback, so we're not approaching the setback. But the other limiting factor is FAR, right?
Uh-huh.
So we have a height limit, you have a FAR typically, and so this is maxed out on the FAR.
Okay.
So we max out the height, and then the rectangle reduces based on the FAR.
So you could have, I guess you could have stacked more units on each floor, but this is 1 unit per floor, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. The original, I mean, when we were going through the design, we did have a plan, an iteration that had 2 apartments on the floor, where, basically one here and one here, and then a hallway between. So.
And was there any sort of thoughts on putting a different program on the ground floor? Because when I walked the first time, I was surprised that that was an apartment on the ground floor. But I didn't know if it was kind of a zoning, like it's only residential, or if it was.
No, we could have had resident or commercial on the ground floor, but the commercial doesn't yield as much money as residential architecture, and so there was a push to do that. We also had that amazing backyard, and so to really activate that townhouse, it seemed like a no-brainer to us to really get to use this as a part of a residence, as opposed to a retail.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, one thing that is, we forget, because we're here in Florida, that like a little open space in New York is a luxury. So
Totally
that kind of distance to have open views. Okay, a couple of questions here from the students. Could you please expand on 100 Franklin Street?
On 100 Franklin Street. Sure. Well, that project is, it's currently kind of finishing up. 100 Franklin was, a project that's been in the works of DDG for many years now also. And basically it's these weirdo sites in Tribeca that are kind of 2 interlocking triangles come to a point. It's the plan of it. It almost looks like a bow tie or something with 2 triangles. And basically it was considered unbuildable as a site. It's a very kind of, it almost seems like a studio site for sure, like something you can get in a studio, where it's this 200-foot long facade, but then the floor plate is only 1,500 square feet of each of those rectangles roughly or something. So, it was an interesting opportunity for us. We were approached by the owner, who I guess he has his offices are across the street He wanted to see something nice to look at, is what he told us. So he sold it to us at a very reasonable price that, you know, kind of made it feasible for us to develop it, because it really, I think a lot of developers had looked at it before and no one could really make sense of it because it's two rectangles. It came out really nice, and we were able to kind of explore the Peterson brick again. You know, that's another product material that we really like to use, and end up with this really 200-foot long facade in the city, which is rare for such a small building to be able to do that. I mean, for us, it was like, you know, like you say, the exposure on the street is kind of, and kind of the brand building was something that we thought, you know, would help us in kind of moving forward. And we didn't think necessarily that we'd make a ton of money on the project, but it's just the exposure of it and dealing with it. I mean, the design of it is really informed by when you go through Tribeca and you look at these secondary facades of buildings that are not really fronting streets. And you see these random window patterns, and just windows occur where they need to occur. They're not part of any kind of exterior organization necessarily. And so we played on that as an idea, and used the red brick because of its relationship to Tribeca and the neighborhood. Again, it was a landmark project, and we had to present in front of the Landmark Commission. There was a lot of opposition to the project from the neighborhood based on the fact that we were covering up our neighbors' windows. And, you know, these property line windows in New York are not protected, essentially. So you could have them, but if the neighbor chooses, there is a building up above you, you have to kind of close them up. So that was the source of much of the opposition to that project. But so it was a long period of going through landmarks and community board review and stuff. And so
Jesse, I'm curious what happens. Do you know, like, you know, bedrooms, for instance, are required to have windows. So what happens if you have a bedroom and a window on a property line and it's decent property goes up?
It's technically not a legal bedroom if it depends on a property line window. So
really?
It was never a legal bedroom to begin with. So, and when you're building, you're allowed property line windows, but you have to file what's called a restrictive declaration, which essentially is a legal document saying that when my neighbor builds up, I'll close up the window. So it's kind of the responsibility of the owner. We always put them in because light is so valuable, right? I mean, to have, when you're kind of crammed in the city, to have an extra window is totally worth it. It doesn't satisfy any code requirements for light and air on the interiors.
I was going to ask a quick question, Henry. You know, just everything you've shown, and I'm quite familiar with the work, and it's impressive the amount of, like, you know, full scale presentation that happens. Like, did you guys build like presentation models? Did you like 3D printings? Did you rely on other, you know, methods?
This was kind of pre 3D printing explosion. We did do that in our later projects a lot, you know, especially for the tower on the Upper East Side. But we did build some smaller scale models. But, you know, a lot of it was just done, you know, using, like, I would build the individual pieces of stone in SketchUp and just kind of manipulate them around and try to come up with forms, just using that idea of that it's a topography model, you know, and kind of, there was a lot of that work. And then just our full scale mock-up on Warren Street of that other building we were doing right before it kind of helped us get comfortable with a lot of the detailing and really kind of knowing what we could do. I mean, it was...
Maybe that stuff would have been more necessary had there been like a client to present it to or something.
Right. That's right.
You don't have to sell it,
I mean, having to, and, you know, I don't necessarily know that you know, the Joe McMillan, who's the CEO of DDG, like the kind of head of the company, he knew what we were doing exactly until he saw it, you know. And he saw the drawings, but, you know, I don't know. It was like that. I mean, there was a lot of kind of confidence in us without necessarily having the history to back up that confidence. But it was, we were all kind of getting into it in a way that was beyond our experience level, I would say.
Okay, there is one question here, and I want to expand the question. So one of the students is asking if you have any a basement, if there is anything on a basement. And my addition to the question is, and I guess also for us here in Florida, these are high-end, like one apartment per floor building, and parking, like requirements, or I mean, how does it work? Like, I mean, in Miami, it would be unconceivable to design a building not have any parking, right?
Yeah.
And also another question that I would add to that, I mean, part of the same package is, because it's one of the challenges the students are having with the building that where they're designing is sort of the back of the house. Like, how do you take garbage out? And I mean, in your case, you're very like, there's only one door.
Yeah, so
okay.
There is a sneaky little door that comes up from the basement, and you can kind of see it goes right down there, and it kind of goes out the same portal that you enter. So that's how we get garbage out of this building. There is no parking requirement in kind of the densest parts of Manhattan. You know, they encourage public transit, and if you're living in this building, you have the means to have off-site parking and the car brought to you. You know, so it's yeah. I think everybody here probably has cars, but they just you know, they have valet service. And,
yeah. So in the basement, what do you have? Basically, the
so in
boiler
the basement
and stuff like that.
For this project, we have utilities. You know, like half of it's utilities, and half of it is tied to the townhouse. You know, if you walk down here, there's a stair that goes down to kind of half of the basement floor is given up to this this townhouse. The other one's like a trash room and electrical room. All the utilities come in underground here, right? So often usually your basement has those points of entry in your main electrical room and plumbing rooms and fire alarm room. And
which is all accessible from the sidewalk.
From that one kind of view. If you go up when you go to Bonds, you guys will get up there at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah.
When you go into the entry, just look to your left and you'll see stairs that go down into the basement.
They just have a hatch on the sidewalk, right?
No, we have a real stair. It's also, let me see. So like this thing right here looks like a mountain of stone, but it's really the roof of the stair that you enter here and go down, and it's kind of roofed over and camouflaged by this this landscape feature.
Cool. Any other questions from students? I mean,
Sophia just asked a question.
what was the process of integrating the plants into the facade? Was there any issue to protect the soil under each window? I guess like what?
Yeah,
like drainage and stuff like that.
Drainage was an issue, yes. I mean, initially we were thinking we could get away with just draining on the facade, you know, but not true. You know, we had to integrate a vertical kind of piping system. I think there's two where, you know, it runs in this bay and in this bay, and then these all kind of feed into it on every floor as drainage. They're totally waterproof on the inside, and then there's soil, and they work like any other planter. They also have irrigation.
An independent irrigation system.
Yes. So yeah, it was a lot. We also have planters built into the parapets up here. So, you know, my premise on that was just like, you have to waterproof a parapet. You know, you have a coping cap on it. So we have the coping cap, and then we extend the perimeter wall above it and develop a planter inside of the parapet. Make that something, I don't know if you can see it there. So that parapet wall has planter inside of it, and then the coping's kind of with this open joint rain screen. The coping lets water out through there. It gives you this. Oops.
Yeah, that's what in Europe called a ventilated facade.
Yeah.
This is,
yeah.
It breathes. Right?
It breathes. Yeah. Yep. It's definitely a European idea. I mean, Peter Guthrie, who's, you know, the architect partner, he worked for Peter Gluck for many years. I don't know if you know him, but his model of doing architecture and design build is kind of something that we adopted. Yeah, he learned this rain screen system from Gluck's office.
Great. Well, I guess, I don't know, students, if you have any other questions, if anything, you can also email me and I can forward them to Jes. It would be good actually to have you in one of our reviews if you want to come and take a look at students' work.
Yeah,
it's only 85 students, so.
85. Is it going to be in person or on Zoom?
No, on Zoom.
On Zoom, sure.
Yeah. No, we have 5 different studios,
Mm-hmm.
so each one have like 15, 14 students. But these conversations are for everyone.
Yeah, okay.
It's part of their integrated building systems class.
Sounds good.
All right, well, thank you very much. And,
all right, guys, yeah. Glad to participate.
Jesse, we would invite you out for a lunch and a cocktail. So we'll have a Zoom cocktail hour, but you have to be
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do that.
Let's
all
do
right,
it.
Yeah. We're gonna see if you're interested. I mean, we're gonna see Nick House. He's gonna present it on this format soon.
Yes.
But also the Morphosis, the Cooper Union building.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
On Bauer Street. So I'll send you all the invites.
That'd be great.
All right.
All right,
Thank you very much. Okay.